Hello lovely viewers, you are most welcome to our channel Poetry Online. In this video, we shall be discussing the background of the novel Weep Not Child by James Ngugi wa Thiong'o. Kindly subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to get updates on all our new videos. Once again, let us assure you of a very interesting discussion. Get ready for this lesson. Weep Not Child by Ngugi wa Thiong'o is set in a Gikuyu village in Kenya during the 1952 to 1960 emergency. Weep Not Child is Ngugi wa Thiong'o's first novel. It is a moving novel about the effects of the Mau Mau uprising on the lives of the ordinary men and women, and on one family in particular. Two brothers, Njoroge and Kamau, stand on a garbage heap and look into their futures. Njoroge is to attend school, while Kamau will train to be a carpenter. But this is Kenya, and the times are against them. In the forest, the Mau Mau is waging a war against the white government, and the two brothers and their family needs to decide where their loyalties lie. For the practical Kamau, the choice is simple, but for Njoroge the scholar, the dream of progressing through learning is a hard one to give up. Background of Mau Mau. In 1952, the Mau Mau uprising began as a reaction to inequalities and injustices in British-controlled Kenya. The response of the colonial administration was a fierce crackdown of the rebels, resulting in many deaths. In 1956, the uprising had effectively been crushed, but the extent of opposition to the British regime had clearly been demonstrated. In 1963, they finally achieved independence. The British colonial presence in Kenya began in the late 19th century. The region today known as Kenya had previously been under the control of Sultan of Zanzibar, but pressure from British and its military had forced the Sultan to hand over the territory to British Empire, as well as neighboring Tanganyika, to Germany. From around 1890, the British began to move inland, hoping to gain access to the fertile highlands and provide greater security for Uganda, which had also been claimed as a British colony. In order to facilitate this, a railway line from Mombasa to Kisumu was built using Indian workers. The British forces were sent to suppress any resistance from the ethnic groups living in the Central Highlands. Some of the ethnic groups are Maasai, the Kikuyu, and the Kamba. The Kikuyu attempted to mount some resistance to the intrusion of imperial forces into their lands. This resistance was met with brutality from the colonialists, who carried out executions and punitive expeditions to hunt down Kikuyu and Kamba people. This campaign of pacification, combined with the famine and disease that swept the region during this period, resulted in significant loss of life and property amongst the indigenous people. An epidemic of rinderpest, a disease that severely affects livestock, heavily contributed to the devastation of the local population. In 1903, the arrival of the European settlers in Kenya added to the troubles of the indigenous people. Whilst the number of white immigrants were relatively few, they claimed a disproportionately large amount of land, the majority of which was seized from Africans. A policy of free allocation was undertaken, expropriating fertile lands from locals in order to give it to white farmers who mostly moved from Britain or South America. This process marked the start of a pattern that would define the relations between Europeans and indigenous Kenyans for the first half of the 20th century. The influx of settlers increased sharply after the end of the First World War, as the British government undertook a scheme to settle many ex-soldiers in the region. Continuing land seizure to provide for these settlers drove Africans to form organizations that campaigned for greater land rights for the indigenous people in Kenya. These organizations included the East African Association, formed in 1921 but banned the following year, and the Kenyan African Union, formed in 1942. After the Second World War, the discontentment amongst the African Kenyans was intensified by the lack of progress. Hundreds and thousands of Kenyans lived in poverty in the slums around Nairobi, with little chance of employment or basic social justice. In comparison, most of the white Europeans and many of the Indians who had settled in Nairobi enjoyed a conspicuous level of wealth and frequently treated indigenous Africans with hostility and contempt. A similar state of affairs existed in rural areas, where 3,000 European families owned more land than the 1 million Kikuyu driven into reserves. This situation, the culmination of decades of mistreatment and oppression under the British rule, created an atmosphere of discontentment that fed into the various Kenyan nationalist movements and ultimately led to the Mau Mau uprising. This is the background of the novel Whip Not Child by Ngugi wa Thiong'o. Thanks for watching this video. Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share this video.